Every time you tap your phone, you're completing an electrical circuit with your finger. That's not a metaphor. Your body is literally part of the system. Capacitive touch. Your screen doesn't detect pressure. It detects a change in an invisible electric field. Beneath the glass sits a grid of microscopic conductive lines that create a capacitive field across the surface. When your finger approaches, you act like a capacitor plate that disturbs that field. The electronics measure this as a change in capacitance, typically less than 1 picofarad. That's 1/trillionth of a farad, a margin so tiny it's drowned out by noise from everything else in the device, which is, not ideal. Yet the touch controller scans the grid up to 240 times per second, filtering out everything that isn't you, and reports your exact position with sub-10 millisecond latency. This tech dates back to the 1960s for air traffic control, but resistive screens dominated consumer tech because they were cheaper. They also felt terrible. The 2007 iPhone changed everything by deploying projected capacitive multi-touch at scale, and resistive screens died overnight. Your finger qualifies as conductive because the human body is mostly water and salt. Break that connection with thick rubber gloves and the screen stops working. It's not ignoring you out of spite. You're just no longer part of the circuit. But if you think invisible electric fields are impressive, wait until you hear about the mechanical illusions your phone uses to make flat glass feel like it's clicking. Haptic engines. Your phone's home button is lying to you. There is no click. Yup, there hasn't been a real moving part there in years. Like, what you're feeling is a carefully orchestrated lie, and you fall for it every single time. Here's the thing. Modern devices use linear resonant actuators that oscillate a tiny internal mass back and forth at exactly 150 to 300 hertz. Apple's Taptic engine, first dropping in the iPhone 6s, proved that a vibration pulse lasting just tens of milliseconds was enough to completely convince your brain that solid glass physically depressed under your thumb. It didn't. The glass never moved, but wait, it gets weirder. Your brain isn't just trusting the touch. The haptic pulse is so tightly synchronized with a visual animation and a subtle audio click that your brain fuses all three signals into one unified, completely fake physical action. You perceive a button. There is only software. A system update can literally change how glass feels under your fingers without altering a single physical component. Your hardware's personality lives in code now, which is, not ideal. And those strong vibrations draw several hundred milliamps per burst, forcing engineers to gut the intensity to save battery. So your fake button is also a slightly weak fake button. Turns out the motion sensors tracking every twitch of that fake button are just as deceptive, but we'll get into that with accelerometers and gyroscopes. Your phone knows when you've rotated it, your fitness tracker counts your steps, and your camera stabilizes shaky video. None of this involves cameras or GPS. It's all happening inside chips smaller than a grain of rice. MEMS accelerometers measure acceleration by suspending microscopic proof masses on springs so tiny you'd need a microscope to see them. When you tilt your phone, these masses shift position, and the device measures that movement capacitively, detecting changes from fractions of 1G to tens of JIC during a hard drop. MEMS gyroscopes use a different trick. They vibrate tiny structures at precise frequencies, and when the device rotates, the Coriolis effect reveals rotation rates. These sensors sample between 50 and 1,000 times per second, depending on what they're tracking. Modern phones pack both into a single millimeter scale package called an IMU. Together, they enable dead reckoning. Your phone integrates tiny changes in acceleration and rotation to estimate how it moved through space, even when GPS is blocked. Consumer sensors drift too quickly for this to replace GPS long term, but for short bursts, it works surprisingly well. Here's the thing. These structures survive daily life, while flexing distances measured in nanometers. You drop your phone, it experiences dozens of G, and the proof mass slams against its limit, stops, and bounces back. A common misconception is that step counters use GPS for every step. In reality, they rely almost entirely on accelerometer patterns, recognizing recognizing the rhythm of walking, but if microscopic motion sensing sounds precise, wait until you see how your phone measures distance to objects using invisible laser pulses faster than you can blink. LiDAR and time-of-flight sensors. Your phone is measuring the speed of light with your coffee table. Every time you unlock with Face ID, snap a portrait photo, or place a virtual couch in your living room with AR, a tiny laser invisible to your eyes is firing thousands of pulses per second and timing how long each one takes to bounce back. We're talking about measuring intervals so short that light only travels about 6.7 nanoseconds per meter round trip. To resolve distances with centimeter precision, the electronics need to catch timing differences of tens of picoseconds, and this is happening in your pocket constantly while you scroll Twitter. These systems aren't infrared cameras passively watching heat signatures, they're active emitters blasting structured near-infrared light in the 800 to 950 nanometer band, completely invisible to humans but perfectly detectable by specialized photodiodes. Your phone is essentially running a scaled-down physics lab experiment every time it maps depth, the same conceptual technique used in high-end scientific instrumentation and space missions, just miniaturized for casual daily abuse. Most smartphone LiDAR operates at ranges of about 3 to 5 meters, which is plenty for mapping your face or room, but nowhere near the tens or hundreds of meters that automotive systems achieve. To simplify the brutal timing demands, many consumer sensors use modulated continuous wave techniques, measuring phase shifts between emitted and received waveforms instead of trying to catch single photon returns. The result is that your phone performs relativistic physics experiments in real time, measuring nanosecond light echoes to build 3D maps of coffee tables, and you never think about it. There's a laser array firing invisible light at your surroundings dozens of times per second, and the only reason you know it exists is because portrait mode looks slightly better. But if measuring light timing sounds impressive, wait until you see what happens to the raw data your camera sensor spits out before it becomes the photo you actually post. Image signal processors. Your camera doesn't take photos, and it builds them from scratch, and I can prove it. Every sensor in your phone uses a Bayer pattern where each pixel captures only one color: 50% green, 25% red, 25% blue. When you snap a 12 megapixel photo, you're getting 6 million green readings, 3 million red, and 3 million blue that the image signal processor interpolates into what looks like a complete image. The camera is literally guessing the missing color data at every single pixel. But here's where it gets weird. Modern ISPs process gigapixels per second when shooting 4K video, running demosayasing to fill color gaps, denoising to smooth grain, HDR merging to blend exposures, and machine learning pipelines that decide what your photo should look like. Night mode doesn't take one long exposure. It combines frames over 1 to 5 seconds, aligning and averaging multiple shots to brighten the scene without blur. The final photograph is a composite that never existed at a single moment in time. The ISP acts as co-author, making countless aesthetic decisions invisibly: how much to sharpen edges, how saturated it is to make colors, how aggressively to smooth skin. Two phones with identical sensors pointed at the same scene produce strikingly different images because their ISPs embody different philosophies. Brand wars over who has the best camera are really ISP tuning wars. You're not seeing reality, you're seeing a heavily interpreted artifact shaped by invisible math happening faster than you can blink. But if you think your photos are heavily manipulated, wait until you see how your wallet talks to payment terminals without batteries. Your tap-to-pay card is doing cryptography powered by literally nothing: RFID and NFC. Passive NFC tags harvest a few milliwatts from a 13.56 MHz reader field, which is enough to power a chip that performs actual cryptographic operations with zero battery. Like, your transit card wakes up, authenticates itself, generates a dynamic security code, and responds, all powered purely by a changing magnetic field for a fraction of a second. The entire contactless payment completes in 300 to 500 milliseconds. that tiny copper coil and silicon chip just did robust crypto on harvested RF energy like some kind of technological vampire, a polite one. Now, NFC standards like ISO IEC 1443 define communication at a roughly 4 centimeter range, which brings us to the RFID blocking wallet industry. Your contactless cards cannot be read from across a room. Near-field coupling requires close proximity and proper antenna alignment. Someone is not scanning your pocket from 3 tables away. The physical gesture of tapping is literally part of the security model. Those wallets are mostly marketing against a threat that is functionally impossible at 13.56 MHz. But if you think handshaking a card is complicated, wait until you see what your earbuds go through. Bluetooth, handshaking. Every time you pair a device, a full-blown state machine argument erupts in the 2.4 GHz band. This is the same frequency as your Wi-Fi, your microwave, and probably your neighbor's baby monitor. It is a radio war zone, and right in the middle of it, your phone and your earbuds have to figure out who's in charge. Classic Bluetooth chops this spectrum into 79 channels that are 1 MHz wide. Bluetooth Low Energy uses 40 channels that are 2 MHz wide. Both of them are frequency hopping up to 1,600 times per second just to survive the noise, but first they have to find each other, exchange capabilities, agree on master and peripheral roles, pick an audio profile, negotiate a codec, and set up encryption keys using secure, simple pairing. All of that takes hundreds of milliseconds, sometimes entire seconds, with BLE optimized for faster low energy reconnections compared to legacy devices. Is it any wonder pairing fails? Next time it hangs, just remember, your devices are literally yelling across a crowded room while swapping cryptographic keys and hopping frequencies 1,600 times a second. The miracle isn't that it fails. The miracle is it works at all for billions of devices, but even when the handshake succeeds, the data arrives completely mangled by interference. Which brings us to how anything actually survives the trip, because error correction is doing the heavy lifting nobody talks about. Error correction. Code. Your phone has survived a cosmic ray attack today and you didn't even notice. Every second, radiation from space is flipping bits in your memory, corrupting data, and scrambling signals. Error correction codes are the invisible safety net catching these failures before they ruin your day, silently fixing mistakes faster than they can propagate. Without them, your Wi-Fi would drop constantly, your SSD would lose files at random, and streaming video would be impossible. The breakthrough came in 1950 when Richard Hamming pioneered error correction at Bell Labs, creating codes that could detect and fix single-bit errors by adding extra parity bits. Modern systems use far more powerful schemes. Reed-Solomon codes protect QR codes and optical discs, turbo codes enabled 3G and 4G networks, and LDPC codes now underpin 5G and cutting-edge storage. These aren't just detecting errors, they're correcting them on the fly. Without retransmission, your phone can receive a corrupted wireless signal where more bits are wrong than right, and the code's mathematical structure still reconstructs the intended message perfectly. Cosmic rays cause bit flips at about 1 per several gigabytes of RAM per month at sea level, higher altitude or space, and the rate shoots up. ECC memory in servers adds 8 extra bits per 64-bit word, correcting any single bit error and detecting multi-bit errors without asking for the data again. Your laptop probably doesn't have ECC, which means random bit flips can crash applications or corrupt files silently. Most people never notice because the probability is low, but over billions of devices and trillions of operations, it happens constantly. Error correction is the invisible force keeping the damage contained. At least your RAM only has to worry about occasional cosmic rays, unlike your SSD dealing with worn-out flash cells every single write, .dhcp, and IP addressing. Every time your phone connects to Wi-Fi, an invisible identity negotiation happens. Your device silently asks the network for a temporary local address and the router hands one over. Without this, you'd manually configure IP addresses, subnet masks, and gateways for every network you join. Nobody got time for that. Here's how it works. Your device broadcasts a discover message, so the router offers an available IP, your device requests it, and the router acknowledges. The whole handshake takes milliseconds. You get that address on a lease, usually a few hours to a couple days, then it auto-renews. Most home routers assign private addresses from reserved ranges like 192.168xx. These only exist locally. To reach the actual internet, your router uses NAT to rewrite packet headers, so all your internal devices share one single public IP. Two houses can both have a device thinking it's 192.168.1.42 internally, but externally they're completely different public addresses. This abstraction is why hosting game servers from home is a nightmare. Incoming connections hit your router and have no idea which internal device to reach without manual port forwarding. IPv4 gives us roughly 4.3 billion addresses. Sounds like a lot until you realize that's not even one per human. IPv6 fixes this with enough addresses for trillions per person, but NAT workarounds have stretched IPv4's lifespan way beyond expectations. The invisible part, you might be 168.105 at a cafe, 10.0 and 0.23 at home, and 172.16.5.8 at a friend's place. To the websites you visit, you're three entirely different public IPs depending on which network you're on. You never actually have an address, you're leasing one. But if you think invisible identity negotiation is complicated, wait until you hear about the system that translates human-readable names into those numerical addresses in the first place. DNS. Every time you type a website name, instead of memorizing a string of numbers, you are relying on a system that replaced a single text file with a hierarchical, distributed database spanning the entire planet. DNS, the domain name system, links human-readable names like youtube.com to the numerical IP addresses computers actually use to route traffic, and it happens so fast, often in a few milliseconds when cached, that you never notice the massive infrastructure translating your request before the page even starts to load. DNS was introduced in the 1980s to replace the original host.txt file, a single document that every computer on the early internet had to download and manually update. By 1987, the modern form was formalized, creating a hierarchy of name servers that could distribute the workload and update independently. At the top sit root servers operating under 13 logical identifiers, but each identifier is actually implemented by hundreds of physical servers distributed globally. These instances collectively handle billions of queries per day, directing requests down through top-level domains to the authoritative servers that hold the actual records for specific sites. Every DNS record comes with a time-to-live value that tells resolvers how long they can cache the answer before asking again. This caching dramatically reduces latency, turning what could be a multi-step global lookup into a single local memory fetch. But it also means changes propagate slowly, update a record to point to a new server, and some users might still hit the old address for hours or even days. Here's where it gets darker. Whoever controls the DNS record for a domain controls where traffic goes when someone types that name. Change a single record and you can reroute vast amounts of traffic to a phishing site or a blocking page. Governments and ISPs can block entire domains by returning false addresses or refusing to resolve them at all, effectively erasing sites from existence to the user. It just looks like the site does not exist. No error, no explanation, just nothing. DNS is fast, distributed, and largely reliable, but it is also a single point of leverage over how hundreds of millions of people navigate the internet. GPS trilateration. Your phone is solving a relativistic space-time problem every single second, and you have no idea it's happening. Every time that blue dot updates on your map, your device is correcting for the fact that clocks in orbit tick faster than clocks on Earth because gravity warps time differently up there. If engineers ignored Einstein's predictions, your position would drift by several kilometers per day. This isn't theoretical physics. This is necessary math running in your pocket right now. And contrary to what most people assume, GPS satellites don't see you. They don't track you. They don't receive anything from your phone. Your receiver is a passive listener, picking up broadcasts from space and doing all the calculation locally. The satellites are essentially very expensive, very accurate clocks in the sky, screaming their timestamps at everyone and no one. Here's how it actually works. Each satellite broadcasts a precise timestamp along with a pseudo-random code. Your phone measures the time delay to calculate distance. Light travels at a fixed speed, so time equals distance. One satellite gives you a sphere of possible locations. 2 satellites narrow it down to a circle. 3 would theoretically pin you to 2 points, but you need a 4th satellite to solve for your receiver's own lousy clock, which drifts constantly. This is trilateration, not triangulation. Triangulation measures angles. Trilateration measures distances and finds where spheres intersect. Your phone is solving for 4 unknowns at once: your XYZ position in 3-dimensional space plus the error in your own clock. 4 satellites, 4 equations, 4 unknowns. But all of that depends on one non-negotiable correction: relativity. Satellite clocks would drift by 38 microseconds per day if left uncorrected, because time moves slightly faster in weaker gravity. 38 microseconds doesn't sound like much until you remember that light moves about 300 meters per microsecond. That drift alone would cause position errors accumulating at over 10 kilometers per day. Einstein isn't optional here. He's baked into the signal corrections, but at least GPS gives you answers in seconds, unlike the invisible network holding the entire internet together under the ocean, which took years to lay and can be severed by a single ship anchor: the global subsea cable network. Here's the thing: nobody tells you about the cloud. It's not in the sky. It's at the bottom of the ocean. Every time you stream a video from another continent, your data travels as light pulses through hair-thin glass fibers lying on the seabed, not satellites. Physical cables wrapped around the entire planet. Over 1 million kilometers of submarine fiber optic cable sit on ocean floors right now. That's enough to wrap the Earth over 25 times. These cables push over 20 terabits per second through a single fiber pair by shooting multiple colors of laser light through the same fiber at once. That's enough bandwidth to transfer the entire Library of Congress in under a second. They're laid by specialized ships along routes exceeding 8,000 meters deep. That's deeper than Mount Everest is tall. To keep the signal strong, optical repeaters built in every 50 to 100 kilometers act as underwater amplifiers powered by direct current from shore stations. But here's where it gets weird. The first transatlantic telegraph cable succeeded back in 1866. People were sending Morse code across the Atlantic before the light bulb was commercialized. Now we're pushing literal terabits, and most people don't even know these cables exist. The wireless world is profoundly wired. Your phone connects to Wi-Fi, sure, but the moment your data crosses an ocean, it dives into a glass fiber on the sea floor. Satellites handle some traffic, but they're slow and capacity constrained. The vast majority of intercontinental traffic goes subsea, and these cables are fragile. Ship anchors cut them, earthquakes snap them, there have even been cases where sharks bit them. A single severed cable can spike latency for millions of people. The infrastructure holding up the borderless internet is physical and vulnerable. We talk about the cloud like it's ethereal when it depends on the most wired infrastructure ever built. It's all glass and light and ocean floor. So the next time someone tells you the internet is wireless, remind them, yeah, the last 100 meters might be. Is the other 10,000 kilometers? That's physical cable just underwater. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.